Hello and welcome into the GSMC Sports Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, TJ Mabardi. Today is Thursday, August 1st, and today we are going to be diving into Team USA's victory that took place yesterday against South Sudan. A little bit of vengeance there after the close call during the exhibition matchups. The US came out this time and were full throttle from the jump. But, of course, the way that Team USA is being covered right now, there's always some type of controversy in terms of Steve Kerr's minutes rotations. There was a change to the starting lineup, and Joel Embiid was bumped out of not just the starting lineup, but the rotation as a whole yesterday. So we're going to be discussing all things that come with that. Additionally, on the basketball front, just yesterday, the Cleveland Cavaliers decided to sign center Jarrett Allen to a new contract extension, marking the third extension they've handed out this offseason, so we'll be diving into that as well. We will then be continuing on with our season previews for all 32 teams. Today we have the defending champion Kansas City Chiefs, so we will be breaking down their chances of becoming the first team in the Super Bowl era to three-peat. And then we will be finishing off the show with some baseball, I should say, talking about Wednesday's headlines, the New York Yankees pulling off a sweep against the Philadelphia Phillies, Jackson Holliday being called up again and ending up hitting a grand slam, and then additionally we will be finishing off the show by talking about the Boston Red Sox winning their first series of the second half of the season. So a whole lot to dive into, but before we do so, just a reminder to like, follow, subscribe wherever you keep up with us. To any of our viewers, be sure to use the comment section to give us your thoughts on the latest happenings in sports as we try and make this show as interactive as possible. And if you would like to become a bigger part of the show, you can go to the link that is streaming across the bottom ticker, gsmcpodcast.net. If you leave a tip or donation with a comment, your comment will pop up on screen for everyone to see. Anything would be greatly appreciated there. The United States is showing sort of who they are, their true colors at this point. There was all types of people that were a little bit up in arms considering they had some close calls early on in the exhibition stage, but it seems like they are finally hitting their stride. Just yesterday, they played South Sudan, who of course notably came just one LeBron James layup away from winning their original exhibition game, but this time the U.S. came out with some legitimate urgency, obviously having that close call to South Sudan a couple weekends ago, and the fact that South Sudan, they are really becoming, one of the biggest stories in basketball Olympics right now, considering the fact that they are greatly overachieving in terms of their expectations. They actually won their first game of the group stage against Puerto Rico as well, so they could have a chance if they end up pulling off the upset win against Serbia to really start making some noise. But it wasn't enough, the willpower wasn't enough to take down the loaded roster of the United States, and outside of an early third quarter surge, this game was all USA. Steve Kerr made some adjustments to the starting lineup once again. His rotations and the lineups he's been throwing out there have been a big storyline to follow along the path of these Olympics, and yesterday we saw a new starting lineup. For the first time, Joel Embiid was not in that core starting five. Instead, Steve Kerr decided to start Anthony Davis and additionally Jayson Tatum, who very notably got a DNP in Game 1 against Serbia. He started in this game as well. So it was Jayson Tatum and Anthony Davis in, Joel Embiid and Jrue Holiday out of the starting lineup. And again, so much attention and I think overemphasis is put on what these starting lineups look like, but it was really the bench unit in this game that really came to play for the U.S. led by Bam Adebayo, who had an incredible game. He scored 18 points, 7 rebounds, 2 blocks, was 8 of 10 from the field, knocked down a couple three-pointers as well. And I'm just really glad that Bam is starting to get some more recognition on the national stage. I had to argue with a friend over last weekend about why Bam deserved to be on Team USA, and we didn't necessarily see eye to eye on that, and that's because on the Heat, it is obviously the Jimmy Butler show, and Bam, considering the fact that he's the center, he isn't asked to do as much individual offensive creation, and even when he does, he can knock down his shots, but it's not like he's extremely experienced in being a true ball handler and offensive hub that we're seeing him get his little bit of shine here. It's very clear that, Bam could be the defensive anchor of just about any team in the NBA, and that he is far more improved on the offensive side as well than I think a lot of people realize. It is going to be interesting to see if this could be some sort of a way for the Heat and for Erik Spoelstra, who is also, sitting courtside here on the coaching staff, watching Bam sort of show out and have this kind of, again, I don't know if it's a reintroduction necessarily, but at least the fact that Bam is really turning heads with the way that he's been playing up to this point, if that is something that Spoelstra takes into consideration for how the team is going to choose to operate next season. But Bam being the anchor of that second unit, the U.S., this was a really impressive defensive performance from the team as a whole, holding South Sudan to just 42% from the field, and Bam being a massive part of that, but that bench unit of him, Jrue Holiday, and Derrick White has been incredible defensively. And I want to highlight Derrick White as well, who, of course, isn't the biggest name, has never been an all-star, so a lot of people were making arguments that he shouldn't have been selected to Team USA. But it's clear that he is showing his value. He's turning out, really coming through in the minutes that he's been given up to this point. Yesterday, he was trusted with 17, scores 10 points, 3 steals, and a block. But I think that his defensive impact goes even beyond just what you see on the stat sheet. He is just sort of everywhere in terms of contesting shots and making things difficult with that constant energy that he has. I believe it was Dwayne Wade who talked about the fact that Derrick White just never stops running. And it is very impactful for the U.S. of having somebody who is, more used to being a role player, having an elite glue guy that is willing to do all of the little things and doesn't need the ball in his hands to have success. But also, if you get him an open three-point shot, there's a very good chance he's going to knock it down. He was 3 for 3 from the three-point line in yesterday's game, and I think he's just been really impressive. And, I mentioned Jrue Holiday as well, that he's another one where some people, maybe, frankly, the more casual fans, would argue that Jrue Holiday shouldn't be on the team as well. That's at least, when the first wave of names came out, Jrue Holiday consistently is one of the first people that Team USA looks to add. Grant Hill has been very vocal about this, that Jrue, because of the fact that he brings the leadership, he has the on-ball skills, but more importantly, he brings the defense and the overall energy, that I do wonder, especially as Derrick White played with Jrue Holiday last year, is set to at least play one more season with Jrue. They both just got contract extensions. We'll see how long the Celtics are able to retain that core, but I do wonder if Derrick White could, and granted, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself here. He was just a replacement on this Team USA roster, but I do wonder if he sort of eventually could work his way into being that Jrue Holiday archetype for Team USA for years to come, because Derrick, I believe he is just around 30 years old. I can do a quick double check on how old exactly he is, but he is, exactly 30 years old, and I think that he brings a lot of similar value to what Jrue Holiday is. So I think that he's making an incredible, name for himself early on in this process, and it will be interesting to see if he does ever get taken out of the rotation at some point, because again, those minutes being shifted around have been such a big storyline so far with Team USA. But we also saw LeBron James cross off a couple milestones on his Olympic resume. Now, he didn't necessarily have his best game ever, but even when you get a pedestrian performance from LeBron, he's dropping 12 points, 7 rebounds, and 5 assists like he did yesterday. The 6 turnovers definitely weren't great, but again, along the way, we saw him check off a couple of milestones. He became the 3rd player in U.S. Olympic history to reach 300 career points, joining Kevin Durant and Carmelo Anthony. And then LeBron is already the all-time leader in assists for the Olympics, and he reached the century mark with 100 with his performance in this game. So LeBron, obviously, what can you say about him that hasn't already been said in terms of the longevity? But this is definitely a nice little swan song for him in terms of the Olympic front. He's already said that he does not plan on participating in what's the next Olympics? 2028. So getting LeBron, playing at just about, I wouldn't quite say the peak of his powers, but still being one of the best players in the world. Very clear that he's one of the best players on Team USA still, even at 39 years old. So wanted to highlight that as well. Another milestone, obviously on the other end of the spectrum here, but Tyrese Haliburton did make his official Olympic debut in this one, got his first minutes of the official play outside of the exhibition matches, got 8 minutes. He knocked down a couple 3-pointers at the end of the first half to score a total of 6 points. He had an assist in there as well. Thought that he was fine. I will say this, it is very clear that the defensive part of his game is why it becomes pretty easy to select him as the player that's sort of the odd man out in terms of the rotation, because he gets attacked. And you look at all of the other players that are on the court for Team USA, they play a very switch-heavy style defensively, and Tyrese Haliburton, he gets picked on a little bit, and I think that that's definitely an area that I think generally speaking with Tyrese Haliburton we would like to see be improved. He was definitely sort of being feasted against in that Eastern Conference Finals series against the Celtics. They were consistently going at him and having success. So that's one area. I mean, I think he has all the physical tools to eventually be able to become, even a league average defender. So Tyrese Haliburton, though, I think it's lame how everybody sort of likes to clown on these players for whether or not they do or don't get minutes. It's, obviously and that's just me probably spending too much time on the internet looking at all of the negativity that circulates there, but ultimately a nice little debut for Tyrese Haliburton there. And then the last note here and last performance that I do want to touch on a little bit is Steph Curry, because we have seen him struggle each of the past, I would say it's like 4 games now, where his shooting percentage has not been at the mark that we expect out of him. Just 3 points in this game, did dish out 4 assists, but he was 1 of 9 from the field, 0 of 6 from 3. And he's really been struggling to find his shot, and usually with Steph Curry, that's just kind of the way it goes. It's not like he isn't playing his game or anything. Like, you can talk about the fit issues with Jayson Tatum and Joel Embiid of trying to find these supplementary roles, but Steph Curry has been the primary ball handler for the U.S. up to this point, and, the shots just aren't falling for him, which can be as simple as that. Now, Steve Kerr did even mention, this was according to Brian Windhorst, that Steph is maybe looking to force a little bit more because of the fact that he doesn't know when his next shots are coming, that he's somebody who is used to his entire career being a high-volume player. And to that, I would say so is pretty much everybody else on this roster, other than a Drew Holiday and a Derrick White. everybody on this team is usually shooting around 20 points per game when they are participating in these NBA games, and they are the number one option. That Curry, it's not like, and he's even more so, I think, playing a similar role to what he's used to. So I don't really buy that as an excuse, to be honest. For the rest of these players, like Jayson Tatum, for example, he takes 4 shots yesterday, and everybody says that he is off. But that's because, well, the three-point shooting this entire year has been down for him, so it's not like he's going to be, somebody that's necessarily looking to jack up a bunch of threes. But even if he did and he starts missing, he knows he's going to be benched, that there's way too many good players on the court to be settling for bad shots. But that's not really a philosophy that Steph Curry has to worry about, considering the fact that his NBA head coach in Steve Kerr is the one running the show, and that there is essentially no way Steph Curry would ever get benched unless he were injured. So it's definitely weird what's going on with Steph, but at the same time, you see anybody can have an individual struggle on this US team, and it's really not going to impact the overall results of Team USA. And they improved to 2-0 in the group stage. They played their final game of that group stage on Saturday. They'll be playing Puerto Rico, which should be a relatively easy out for them. Puerto Rico just got their teeth kicked in yesterday, losing to Serbia by over 40 points, I believe it was. So, I wouldn't be entirely shocked if the U.S. came out maybe a little bit slow in that game against Puerto Rico this weekend, but ultimately the talent of this Team USA is just going to overcome just about any amount of effort I think that opposing teams put in. But if you feel differently, definitely be sure to give me your reasons why. I have been pretty adamant that there is no need to panic for the U.S. in terms of, if they did get off to a little bit of a slow start while they were figuring themselves out in that exhibition stage, they're going to be just fine. But again, let me know what your thoughts are in the comments section. But as we continue to talk some basketball here, we are going to be diving into the contract extension that was handed out by the Cleveland Cavaliers just yesterday, as they signed Jarrett Allen to a 3-year, I believe it's technically going down as a max contract, which would be the third of its kind that the Cavaliers have given out this offseason alone. And they are entirely bought in on their current core. So we are going to be diving into that conversation. But before we do so, we have to take a quick break. Do not go anywhere. We will be right back.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, some losing shit. A stupid myth, you choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh, I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast. As we just finished up talking about Team USA's win we are on the note of basketball, and I want to dive into the fact that the Cleveland Cavaliers have decided to sign center Jarrett Allen to a 3-year contract extension. It is being reported at 3 years, $91 million, the maximum amount of money that they could have given up. This is the third player that they've given these big bucks to. It was Donovan Mitchell first, Evan Mobley got his rookie max extension, and now Jarrett Allen. This is a pretty proactive move by the Cavaliers, considering the fact that Jarrett Allen still has another 2 seasons left on the deal that he previously signed with the Cavaliers, where he is going to be making $20 million annually through 2026, and then we're going to see this new contract extension kick in ahead of the 2026-27 season, where his salary cap hit is going to jump up to over $28 million. And I think that this is the right move for the Cavaliers. I've been pretty vocal before that I do think ultimately they're going to have to make some changes to their roster, that I don't necessarily love the current construction of their team with the Garland and Mitchell combination in the backcourt and the Allen and Mobley combination in the front court. But regardless, even if I don't think that the fit is right, every single one of those players is a positive impact player, and I don't think that any one of them is going to ever become a negative asset for the Cavaliers. And Jarrett Allen, I think, has been sort of criminally underrated up to this point in his career. 8 years in the NBA, but he is still just 25 years old, or just finished his age 25 season, just turned 26 in April, but Jarrett Allen, former All-Star in 2022. I think that he is a player that every single team could benefit from. I feel like he's in that similar conversation to Bam Adebayo, who I was just praising in the last segment. Now, he doesn't necessarily, I would say, have quite as much of an upside in terms of range for Jarrett Allen moving forward, but at the same time, who knows? He's been above 70% from the free throw line for the majority of his career. Shot 74% last season. So who knows? Maybe he can extend it even a little bit more to that, those push shots, those short mid ranges that could add a little bit more. But that's why I struggle a little bit with the combination of him and Mobley. I do think that Mobley could definitely have some upside in terms of adding range to his game. One of them almost have to at this point if they're going to continue to play alongside one another. But again, even if I don't necessarily love that pairing, I don't think that either one of them are going to be players that you can't trade or going to become negative assets where you have to attach others on top of them. We've seen a number of these deals over the course of the past few years, of these massive deals that seem impossible to move, and that's just never going to happen because Cleveland, again, you understand that there is a lot of talent with what the Cavaliers currently have. The fit is just a little bit of the complication there. But last season, we did see Jarrett Allen average a career high in points per game at 16.5. He's been a perennial, stud defender. Still waiting on him to get his first selection as an all-defensive player at the end of these seasons. But again, it also, the fact that he is sort of sharing the court with Evan Mobley. Mobley took a lot of those votes from him in the 2022-23 season. So I think that, again, ultimately, the Cavaliers, they have a bright future in terms of the fact that they've acquired all of this talent. They have them all under contract, and they, in my opinion, are going to have a lot of flexibility moving forward here. Now, they just made a change at head coach this offseason, and maybe that's where we can see, a new a new layer come into all of that. They hire Kenny Atkinson, who I think was a little bit scapegoated during his time as the head coach in Brooklyn, has spent the past few years with the Golden State Warriors as a top assistant there. So Atkinson gets his second chance of being an NBA head coach, and I'm definitely high on that. JB Bickerstaff, it's interesting because I also think that he got a little bit of short end of the deal, considering they seemed to be on a pretty good trajectory prior to that Donovan Mitchell trade, that it just seemed like ultimately by the end of that, again, I've repeatedly now said that I don't necessarily know if I like the fit. JB Bickerstaff had that Cavaliers team that was without Mitchell for the last couple games of their second round series against the Celtics. They were without Mitchell for that. They were without Jarrett Allen from halfway through that Orlando series in the first round. You know, Bickerstaff had these guys fighting, and I do think that he deserves some credit there, but I do ultimately understand as well, especially coming off of, I think more than anything, the loss in the 2023 playoffs when they lost in the first round to the Knicks. That's probably what hurt him more than anything. But again, especially so in the NBA, front offices are always going to lean towards defending the players over the coaches, where it feels like the coaches can be a little more interchangeable unless you have, you know, one of the elites in the game or one of the clear problems at the other end of the spectrum as well. So I think that ultimately, you know, this is going to be the make or break year for the Cavs in terms of, do they need to shake things up here? And we'll see how it goes. I mean, I feel like that could have been on the table for the Cavs this past season if it weren't for the fact that Donovan Mitchell was scorching earth headed into the trade deadline and was keeping the Cavaliers at the top of the Eastern Conference. So now, again, new head coach. This is probably going to be the last sort of last dance-ish. Kind of hate using that term, obviously, because very different circumstances as to what it's usually referred to as, but the last run here with this current configuration of the roster, unless they prove that they are going to be able to work alongside one another long term. Now, what's it going to take for that to happen? I do feel like there is some degree that if Donovan Mitchell, and he is an unbelievable player in that top 15, and we see him have the performances that he did at the end of their first round series against the Magic. I want to say he was something like 81 points combined in that atmosphere, at least between games 6 and 7 against the Magic in the playoffs this past year, that he can be the takeover guy at any time. But I do wonder if there's a way for him to take a slight step back to allow Darius Garland to be a little bit more of a creator himself, because it seems like the two of them just sort of butt heads, not from a personality standpoint, but in terms of getting in the way of one another, having the best possible looks that you would prefer them to be set up with. So I don't know. Again, I don't think that there is an easy fix, and ultimately I feel like this is probably heading towards some type of a trade. I would kind of imagine that Jarrett Allen would be the first guy to go out of Cleveland, if not Darius Garland, that they would probably prefer to build around Donovan Mitchell and Evan Mobley if possible. But again, there are definitely layers to that conversation as well, because Mobley, as much as I do believe in the upside with him, Jarrett Allen is more of a win-now player that maybe they try and get. You could probably get a larger return ultimately for Evan Mobley as opposed to Jarrett Allen, especially teams are going to see what Mobley was able to do during that stretch of the postseason where Allen was out, and we saw a little bit more creation and involvement from Evan Mobley offensively. I feel like when they made all of these moves, it sort of stunted the growth of Evan Mobley from an offensive perspective. He's still able to clean up defensively and, be a big time rebounder for them, but At the same time, I think that there is another level for maybe another couple levels for Evan Mobley to grow on the offensive side of the court that I'm just not sure with this current configuration of the Cavaliers if that is going to be possible. But let me know what you think in the comment section. Again, we have some time until we're going to see this actually play out, and it might be over a year before the Cavaliers, make a move. I'm sure when they make this deal to sign Jarrett Allen, that the hope is that they are going to be able to have Kenny Atkinson sort of get to what the root of their problems are and be able to fix them, to have this be the core four moving forward for them. But again, let me know what you think in the comments section. But we're going to be taking our next break here, and when we come back on the other side, we're going to be continuing on with our season previews for all 32 NFL teams. Today we have the defending champion Kansas City Chiefs. So we'll be breaking down what their chances are of being the first team in NFL history during the Super Bowl era to win 3 straight championships, and all of the different off-season acquisitions and losses that are going to shape their season. So we will dive into that, but first, a quick break. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast as we are continuing on with our previews for all 32 NFL teams, and today we have the Kansas City Chiefs. Of course, Chiefs coming off back-to-back Super Bowl championships. They are looking to become the first team in the Super Bowl era to win 3 straight titles, which is something that feels extremely far-fetched in terms of the consistent parity that we see in the NFL. But almost if you look at last year and all of the difficulties they were dealing with throughout the course of the year, that kind of seemed like it was the year that they were vulnerable and nobody was able to top them then. Now, one thing that is definitely important that I feel like could be something that carries over a little bit, and a storyline that I'm going to be watching with the Chiefs, is whether or not we are seeing the beginning of the end with tight end Travis Kelce. Now, Kelce, listen, you look at the raw numbers, and 100% he is still one of the best tight ends in the NFL. 93 receptions in the regular season, 984 yards, and 5 touchdowns. Add to that the fact that he had another 32 receptions in the playoffs to make himself the all-time reception leader in NFL playoff history. By no means am I saying that he is not a good player anymore, but you look across the boards at a lot of his numbers, and I think that ultimately, we saw Travis Kelce end up not making an all-pro team, which is the first time that that's been the case since 2015. His streak of consecutive 1,000-yard seasons during the regular season finally came to an end. It ends at 7, which is a record for tight ends. And I think that Kelce, again, we can acknowledge that even in a down year for Travis Kelce still means he is putting up big-time numbers, but we saw he was not able to sustain that level of physical dominance that we've been seeing for years, especially coming off of 2022, which was debatably the best season of his career, where he had 1,300 yards and 12 touchdowns. And it's a big reason why the Chiefs were able to overcome losing a star wide receiver in Tyreek Hill, is because of the fact that Kelce was basically putting up wide receiver one numbers, which is just sort of unprecedented from the tight end position. So, I think that was a very large reason as to why the Chiefs looked a lot more mortal, especially so during the regular season last year, and that their offense was still, again, a bad year for the Chiefs' offense is still a good year for a lot of teams, but specifically I'm looking at the fact that they were only 15th in scoring last year during the regular season. It was the first time since Patrick Mahomes took over the starting quarterback job that the Chiefs were outside of the top 6 in points per game from an offensive perspective. Now, Kelce, again, just sort of to tie a bow on that conversation, he just signed a new contract extension at the end of April, but it was more of a restructure than anything. The deal that he was already on had him through the 2025 season. This just essentially comes in as a raise for Kelce, giving him $17 million per season for the next 2 years, and is going to make him the highest paid tight end in the league during that time frame. But feels like time is running out a little bit for Kelce. He's at least sort of alluded to the idea that things might be coming to an end for him. He's entering his age 35 season, especially with the physical toll that the tight end position usually takes on. Feels like, we could see things coming to an end for Kelce. And when that's the case, the Chiefs are going to be looking for someone to take the reins from Kelce as the number one option for Patrick Mahomes. Rashee Rice flashed a lot of potential last season during his rookie campaign, had over 900 yards. I don't want to speculate fully on sort of what's been going on with him in the offseason. He's gotten into some issues in terms of legal situations that could lead to a potential suspension. Again, not trying to speculate here. ESPN's Jeremy Fowler said that those issues might even sort of trickle into the 2025 season, and that because it's a slow-moving legal process here, might not end up having any impact on Rashee Rice's 2024 sophomore campaign. But, like I said, he was a second-round pick last year. Strictly talking talent with Rashee Rice, he has what it takes to be a big-time player with those 900 yards last year. We will see about the idea of him being a true definitive number one option for Mahomes. And he has some help this season. The Chiefs made a couple moves in the offseason to try and add to the talent. They added Marquise Brown in free agency on a 1-year, $7 million deal. A first-round pick from 2019. The last time we saw him play in a full season's worth of games with a full season's worth of starting quarterback play, he put up 1,000 yards in 2021 with the Ravens. Now, for whatever it's worth, the Ravens did see that it was worth trading him to the Cardinals as opposed to trying to, string that out any longer. So I do think that makes some sort of a statement on where Marquise Brown is at and what his ceiling could be. The past 2 seasons, he hasn't come close to 1,000 yards necessarily, but that is with Kyler Murray dealing with injuries throughout his time there. So I like the one-season flyer for the Chiefs here, not committing long-term, but if Marquise Brown is ever going to be a real productive NFL player again, kind of feels like this is going to be the year with Patrick Mahomes. And along with Marquise Brown, who is a quick wide receiver, they add, the definition of speed essentially in Xavier Worthy, who they took in the first round of the 2024 draft. Worthy, of course, broke the 40-yard dash record at the NFL Combine, so turned a lot of heads there. I see the vision with Xavier Worthy in terms of the fact that Patrick Mahomes had a lot of success with Tyreek Hill, who was a burner, but Xavier Worthy is very small, and that is something that you can have a little bit of concern about. He's not necessarily somebody I feel like he's going to be sort of working the middle of the field or having these short receptions and breaking off long runs. He kind of feels like the home run hitter, and I don't really see wide receiver 1 potential with him. Now, he can absolutely be a contributing player, and to some degree, the very end of the first round, drafting a very solid wide receiver 2, even a, top end slot wide receiver, that's still some good value there, but I think that there were definitely other wide receivers on the board at that point that have a better chance of fully establishing themselves as a true wide receiver 1. But the reason why the Chiefs were able to overcome their offensive letdowns last season is because their defense was one of the best in the league. The number 2 scoring defense, only behind Baltimore. They allowed 17.3 points per game during the regular season. They actually improved during the playoffs, where they allowed just 13.7 points per game. And I definitely give a lot of the credit to the Chiefs' success last season to the defense. Of course, Mahomes is ultimately the one who ends up being the difference maker, making the big plays at the end of the games, versus Baltimore in the AFC Championship and against San Francisco in the Super Bowl, where he had the third down conversion in the AFC Championship game. He had the walk-off overtime touchdown in the Super Bowl. But even in those games, the Ravens put together a couple successful drives in that first quarter, but after that, the Chiefs' defense pretty much completely shut down the Ravens' offense, which was, again, very prolific last year. And then in the Super Bowl, the 49ers had the third best offense in terms of points per game, and they limited the Niners to just 19 points in regulation, and they got the stop on third down in overtime to force the field goal and give Mahomes the chance to walk it off. So, again, the defense deserves a ton of credit. Now, they lose a couple big-time playmakers for them. L'Jarius Sneed is the obvious big loss. The Chiefs weren't going to be able to pay him, so they end up trading him to the Tennessee Titans. Replacing him may be tough this season. Now, you look at Trent McDuffie, who made the All-Pro first team last year as a sophomore in the NFL, but he's more of a nickel cornerback than somebody who's going to line up on the outside. So it sounds like that's probably going to be what the plan is, at least initially in the season. If things get really bad on that perimeter, maybe they try and bump McDuffie out there. Maybe it's a mid-season acquisition. But I don't think that I have a ton of faith necessarily in what they currently have with the outside cornerbacks. Joshua Williams stepping into a bigger role here. He's a fine player, but, just 2 years of NFL experience. Najee Johnson is the other projected starting corner for Kansas City, according to ESPN, and he just missed the entire 2023 season, only 1 year of experience under his belt as well. So neither one of them are players that you feel like can be anywhere close to the shutdown guy that L'Jarius Sneed was. Now, the Chiefs have a pretty good pass rush, and they are going to shut down the pass game, which was really their strength, because I do think that the Chiefs defense was a little bit more susceptible to the run. In the pass game, they're going to need the rush to get there. Chris Jones, obviously a massive part of that. George Karlaftis had a breakout season last year with 10.5 sacks, and they have some fine depth there. Seeing Anyudike Uzoma, their first-round pick from 2023, him being able to work into the rotation a little bit more would be a positive for them. But they're going to need production up front. And then throw Willie Gay in there as an important loss as well, considering the fact that he was a big part of their defense last year, was really important for them in coverage from a linebacker position. He signed with the Saints in free agency, and the Chiefs are reportedly still confident in their linebacker depth. They have Nick Bolton manning the middle. They have Drew Tranquill, who they were able to retain, signing him to a new deal this offseason. But they're going to need Leo Chenal to take on a bigger role. For Chenal, from week 16 and on, he didn't play over 40% of defensive snaps for the Chiefs, and he is probably going to be a starter for them. So they're going to hopefully get some development there. Looking at their schedule, pretty middle of the pack in terms of difficulty, 12th easiest overall. Now, they have some big-time games against some of the top contenders in the NFL, the Ravens, the Bengals, the 49ers, and the Bills. Maybe you want to throw the Texans into that conversation as well, but definitely some heavy hitters along the way there. Now, that's sort of balanced out by the fact that they play in the AFC West, and they should be able to clean up for the most part in those games. 5 primetime matchups. You look at the season opener against the Ravens, of course, as the defending champs. Sunday Night Football versus Atlanta in Week 3. Monday Night Football versus New Orleans in Week 5. Monday Night Football versus Tampa Bay in Week 9. And then Sunday Night Football against the Chargers in Week 14. So their over-under line is set at 11.5 currently, and I have them going just over at 12-5. This is a team that I think is going to legitimately, specifically on the offensive side of the ball, be improved from last season. You look at the extra amount of talent on the outside, I think that that's going to be a big-time positive for them. Travis Kelce, while I do think that we're going to see him start to slow down, especially in terms of regular season production, I do think that he's going to continue to be there in all of the key moments for the Chiefs, and if they can continue to build on that run game, having Isaiah Pacheco become a top-end running back in the league would be massive for them. Shots below the belt in the comment section says, if Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, they find ways to win like Tom Brady and the Patriots when they started being the favorite, the every year favorite. I would say that generally, yes, as long as you have Patrick Mahomes, he is going to be the favorite to win the majority of the time. Now, I picked against them last year headed into the season because I just sort of have a philosophy that, because at least during my time, in my lifetime, the only way you can repeat in the NFL is if you have Tom Brady, and he did so once. And I guess that extends to Patrick Mahomes now at this point, where you have to have the elite of the elite to do so. Now, Brady wasn't even at the peak of his powers when he repeated in the NFL, so that sort of goes to show just how hard it is to do so. I mean, in terms of betting favorites, I do think that that's probably where we're headed for Mahomes, but again, I think that there's going to be a lot of interesting things to look at with the Chiefs as Travis Kelce sort of comes towards the final years of his career. But looking at how the Chiefs match up to the other teams that I've predicted so far, I have them up to this point with the most wins in the NFL next season, which really shouldn't be, all too much of a hot take. I believe that them and the Ravens are both the two highest, and the 49ers might be in that conversation as well in terms of the over-under lines where they're sitting at. I know the Ravens and the Chiefs are both at 11.5. I'm sure the 49ers are in that conversation as well, but let me know whether you agree, disagree in the comment section and what your expectations for the Chiefs in this upcoming season are. But we are going to be shifting gears now to the MLB, talking some of the biggest headlines that took place from Wednesday. The New York Yankees just completed the sweep of the best team in the MLB with the Philadelphia Phillies. We also saw up-and-coming star Jackson Holliday hit his first career grand slam. So we're going to dive into that and more, but first a quick break. Do not go anywhere. We will be right back.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast. As we are shifting gears here to the MLB, we're going to be going over some of the biggest headlines in the MLB from Wednesday, July 31st. And the first of which that we're going to be talking about is the New York Yankees, who were able to pull off a sweep after they've sort of been under the spotlight. A lot of criticism going against them. The fact that they had been scuffling since mid-June, and they have been very good coming out of the All-Star break. And obviously one of the most exciting parts of that is the addition of Jazz Chisholm to the roster. He now has a hit in every game that he's appeared in so far for the Yankees. And during this series against the Phillies, he was able to hit 4 home runs over the course of games 1 and 2. They end up closing it out on Wednesday with a 6-5 win, and feels like this is a Yankees team where you can really start to, buy into what they have a little bit more. Now, obviously, the way that they started the regular season shows in the first place that they were a force to be reckoned with, at least to some degree, but their flaws started to pop up a little bit more, especially once Giancarlo Stanton went down with injury. We were seeing the fact that outside of Juan Soto and Aaron Judge, there really was not much offense going on that roster, and that if you pitch around those two guys, you can sort of get away with it there. But now you look at this Yankees team and the way that they have been able to add Jazz to the roster. I know there are some Yankees fans that were hoping that they would have gone out and done more, but you add Jazz to the picture. Giancarlo Stanton returned from injury in this series, and you look overall, the starting lineup that they threw out yesterday: Gleyber Torres, Juan Soto, Aaron Judge, Giancarlo Stanton, Jazz Chisholm Jr., Anthony Volpe, Alex Verdugo. I mean, that's a solid top 7. Now, maybe I'm reaching a little bit for Verdugo at 7. Gleyber Torres isn't necessarily incredible from the leadoff spot. I do wonder whether or not we are going to see. I feel like I have to imagine that Jazz is going to take over that leadoff spot, especially the way that, again, you look at the level of production that he's been giving the Yankees so far, that it seems like he probably, would be best suited as their leadoff guy. That's been a very big conversation with the Yankees, is trying to find someone to, fill out that role for them. There was a very brief, experiment of throwing Ben Rice in there, who Ben Rice, by the way, I mean, obviously his average is somewhere in the 180, 190 territory, but good amount of home runs at this point to add to that as well. So, I mean, maybe a little bit of pop that you can throw in at the back of their lineup as well. But you look at Jazz and what he's been doing since joining the Yankees. He has an on-base percentage of 400, and sure, you feel like that's probably going to come down at some point. But, I mean, again, just somebody actually getting guys on for Aaron Judge, and doing so, with some pretty top-end athleticism if you're looking at Jazz Chisholm and Juan Soto together, that is definitely a real positive moving forward here. And again, I probably would have really liked to see the Yankees go after maybe a starter. I know that conversation gets a little bit tricky because of the fact that, sure, you would like a starter, but what was the price that you were going to have to pay to actually get there is definitely a complicated situation to dive into. So I can definitely defend them on that note, but I mean, even still, this feels like an American League that is very much for the taking, and the Yankees are doing everything you could possibly ask of them coming out of the All-Star break. So some positive developments there. On the other end, very quickly here, no panic from me in terms of Philadelphia. The Dodgers are now right on their tails, and it doesn't even feel like the Dodgers are necessarily playing their best baseball right now, but they're just 2.5 games back. It was at one point a lot more substantial than that. The Brewers creeping up as well, only 4 games back of the Phillies. So I've been talking about how I feel like it's sort of the Phillies and the Dodgers league, and everybody else is sort of fighting for their shot from there. But ultimately, maybe it's even a little bit more open than that. But let me know what your thoughts are on that in the comment section. But we also yesterday saw Jackson Holliday get called back up to the Orioles, who Holliday was the number 1 prospect in all of baseball, and it was very exciting to see him get his chance. I believe it was around April that he made his debut, and it was not going well for him for a significant part of that stretch, and he ultimately was recalled back down to the minors following that. Played 10 games, and his batting average was under 100, and it was just nowhere near the level of excitement that we were sort of waiting on. But still just 20 years old. I have no concerns with him long term, but he came back up to the majors yesterday for their game against the Toronto Blue Jays, and he ended up hitting his first home run of his career that resulted in a grand slam, and was able to give the Orioles their significant lead to carry out this game. And was just really fun to see there, just from a player development standpoint. You had to feel bad for Holliday a little bit, considering all of the pressures that were put on him when he was first called on and we were first getting into the MLB season. So storylines were still sort of slowly developing at that point, and all eyes were on him. But here he is, and he may be there to stay, considering the fact that we did just get the unfortunate news yesterday that Jordan Westburg has a fractured hand after he was hit by a pitch during that game. Now, the hope is that he could eventually come back from injury before the playoffs start, but this is definitely a big time loss for the Orioles. And I just talked about the fact that the Yankees seem to be piecing it together in their own right, that it's going to be a very contested race to the end here between the Orioles and the Yankees for that division lead. As things currently stand, the Orioles are just half a game ahead of the Yankees. So again, going to be neck and neck down the stretch there. There's some thoughts out there circulating online that the Orioles could maybe look to one of their top prospects in Kobe Mayo to try and help also supplement some of the offensive power loss that they're losing with Jordan Westburg going down. Would probably require some shuffling, I would say, in terms of the defensive identity there, considering the fact that Mayo is listed as an outfielder on Fangraphs. I'm not sure if maybe he has some extra experience being an infielder, but it is definitely not exactly the perfect fit there, so we'll have to see. Very unfortunate news on the Jordan Westburg front. And then the last thing from yesterday that I did just want to sort of at least briefly hit here is the Arizona Diamondbacks are very it's a very positive, for the most part, stretch of the season for them. They've won 13 of 17 games, and you feel like the World Series runner-ups from last season are maybe starting to hit their stride, but there's one big issue that is on the table for them, and that would be their situation with their closer. Paul Sewald has really not looked himself as of this month, was once one of the best closers in baseball as recently as this past year, and he just continues to struggle as of late. In July, he blew 4 saves, including 3 straight early on in the month. And just yesterday, he was called upon again in the 9th inning as the Diamondbacks were up 5-3. And ultimately, he ended up loading the bases, and the Diamondbacks had to pull him out of the game in favor of Ryan Thompson to come in and try and bail him out. Now, again, it was a 2-run lead at that point, so Thompson ends up having a passed ball. I thought it was a very catchable pitch, but Herrera wasn't able to bring it in behind the plate, and that scored 1. Ultimately, the game ends there because Thompson was able to induce the grounder to come away with it, but the Diamondbacks do have to be feeling a little bit worried. Again, like I mentioned, 13 of 17 games. I believe all 4 losses have come at a blown save by Paul Sewald. So that's definitely a concerning thing moving forward here, where the Diamondbacks, especially how their bullpen was pitching as they were making their postseason run last year, they're going to need to figure out some sort of solution there. I'm not sure what it is that's going on behind the scenes mentally with Paul Sewald, but not a very good sign there. But we are going to be taking our final break of the show here, and when we come back on the other side, we're going to be diving into the Boston Red Sox winning their first series since the All-Star break, talking about the key performances from that, and looking at the Red Sox schedule moving forward as they head into a pretty difficult August. So we will be diving into that. First, final break. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back. Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast for our final segment of the day, where we are going to be discussing the Boston Red Sox finally being able to actually pull through in a series. They win 2 out of 3 against the Mariners for their first series win since the All-Star break. It came down to Game 3 and came down to an extra innings performance from Rafael Devers to hit the walk-off in the 10th to do so, but it was a very big win at this point for the Red Sox, who I think have been hurting themselves more than anything else during this stretch where they have been really struggling coming out of the gates for the second half of the season, where they have been really struggling defensively in terms of racking up some errors, which continued to be the case in Game 2, where James Paxton makes his first start with the Red Sox this season, one of their trade deadline acquisitions, and behind him, the defense just kind of fully failed him. 6 runs were scored while he was in the game pitching, but only 3 of them earned, and it was because of the fact that we have seen this Red Sox team for a while struggle defensively. You can say the same for that Rockies series as well, when the game really got out of hand for them in that Game 3 for Nick Pivetta. I mean, Pivetta just got shelled, so definitely don't want to fully put it on the defense there, but didn't do him any favors. And then against the Yankees, that Juan Soto double off of the monster should have been caught by Tyler O'Neill, but he's not able to catch it, and as a result, Yankees score a couple extra runs and close the Red Sox out in that series as well. So it has been overall a very frustrating start for the Red Sox, and it's not just the defense, like I mentioned. The offense as well, as much as they've been, pretty prominent for the most part, I'd want to give them credit because they have been able to put up runs, and that the pitching hasn't necessarily been able to back them up quite as much. But at the same time, the Red Sox are hitting .239 with runners in scoring position coming out of the break. So that is definitely an issue. Now, you look at, being able to take down the Mariners and looking at this series specifically, it's a big one, just for the confidence sake of the clubhouse to be able to get back on the right track, and B, considering the fact that the Mariners could very likely be one of those teams that they could be fighting for the final wild card spot in the American League. As things currently stand, the Mariners and the Astros are just about neck and neck for the division. The Astros with the tiebreaker, though. So as things stand, the Mariners are right behind the Red Sox for that last wild card spot. Now, both of them on the outside looking in, as the Twins and the Royals are locked up ahead of them. But it's always nice to, of course, take a series against a team that could end up hurting you when September rolls around. So just the flat-out fact of beating the Mariners is of significance, and I thought that the biggest surprise for Boston in this series was just considering how well they were able to hit. And like I mentioned, the runners in scoring position numbers have been bad, and it came with a couple bad days as well. Game 1, they were really able to benefit off of that crazy sequence there in what I believe was the 5th inning. I could double check that one, but going up against this series as a whole, going up against 3 of the best pitchers, one of the best rotations in the league, in Logan Gilbert, Luis Castillo, and George Kirby. But Game 1, when the Red Sox were able to blow it open, it was after that very controversial, it should have been a strike 3 call against Wilyer Abreu with 2 outs, but ultimately a missed strike call there. Abreu ends up working, I think it was a 13-pitch at-bat, ends up driving in a run there, and then the Red Sox double parade just came flying in. This was in the 3rd inning, actually, so, it was in the... I gotta double check here. Sorry, doing this on the fly. Probably not the best idea for myself, but in that 3rd inning is really when they opened that game up, and that definitely have to feel for Gilbert a little bit there. But at that point, you allow, I think it was 4 consecutive doubles. That's a tough beat, but. That game, they went 7 of 9 with runners in scoring position. Outside of that, they were 4 for 15 in Game 2, 2 of 9 in Game 3. And it's been a pretty consistent struggle with them during this second half of the season stretch where they haven't actually been able to drive guys in. And they've been able to get on base. Even in Game 3, that's when the offense sort of came back down to earth. We're only able to put up 3 runs in that game, and it took extras to even do so there. But they had 10 hits in that game, 7 of which came against Kirby, but they couldn't finish the job. Now, lucky for them, we got one of the best starts from Brian Bayo of the season for him, where he ends up pitching into the 7th inning, wasn't able to close it out there, but he got a really impressive performance out of him, which was a positive on that front. But it's interesting because it's not like the offense is totally dead. They are putting guys in position, but finishing the job has definitely been a concern up to this point for me in the second half of the season. Now, I mentioned Devers ends up hitting the walk-off in the 10th inning of Game 3. He has been unbelievable since the All-Star break, slashing .375, .426, and .646 with a .1072 OPS. He's currently on an 8-game hit streak, so is Masataka Yoshida, so you see a lot of these players, again, stepping up and feeling like they might be working themselves into a groove, but they're going to need to actually take advantage of opportunities. That's something that goes back to that Dodgers series, where literally the first game coming out of the All-Star break, they end up losing because they could only put up one run despite putting runners in scoring position 11 times and going 0 for 11 in those situations. Shots Below the Belt says both the Red Sox and Yankees have been quiet in the last couple of years. Is their rivalry still the best in baseball? I mean, I think that it probably, from a national fan standpoint, does still carry a lot of juice in terms of, well, not even national fans. I think that Yankees and Red Sox fans would agree that it's still, real hatred there. But I can also understand, from the outside looking in, it's kind of two teams that have been just hovering. I mean, the Yankees haven't actually won a World Series in forever, and the Red Sox have been, really good for stretches, and then they'll go from first place in the American League East to last, just like that. And they're not necessarily treating themselves like a big market franchise, so I feel like it's definitely cooled off. But yeah, I mean, I think it's still, at least, personally from the inside, I still cannot stand the Yankees, so little bias there on my end, but I think it's still real to some degree. But yeah, I mean, Rafael Devers, like I mentioned, he's been red hot for them. Masataka Yoshida been big. Ultimately, Duran kind of had his maybe the quietest series of the season up to this point, and against good pitching in Seattle, even though they were able to get their share of hits off of. But just like that on the other side, I mean, this is a Mariners lineup that has not been very successful as of the past couple months, and they were able to put up some big numbers against the Red Sox in this series. 7 runs in Game 1, 10 runs in Game 2. Like, it's not a good sign necessarily. And again, that sort of ties back into the defense that especially came into play during their Game 2 matchup during that Paxton start. But ultimately, the Red Sox, it feels like now they can sort of take a deep breath. They have the day off today, and when they come back tomorrow, and what's going to be a pretty competitive August for them, playing Texas twice, Kansas City, Houston twice, Baltimore, Arizona, Toronto, and Detroit at the end are a little bit softer, but none of those teams are necessarily fully rolling over, and they're going to definitely be tested. And a massive part, if the Red Sox are going to be able to turn this thing around a little bit and make a playoff push, it's gonna, I think, in large part, come down to the bullpen, where up to this point, I've had very, very little faith in what the Red Sox bullpen is actually able to give you. Outside of Kenley Jansen, who always has his, share of drama in there as well. He gets the job done, of course, but outside of him, there aren't many guys that can get you to that 9th inning with a lead. And it hurts that Justin Slayton's been injured, Chris Martin has been injured, but that's why they go out and make the addition of Sims and Garcia. Sims, by the way, Lucas Sims, he ends up making his Red Sox debut yesterday and came up in a huge spot for them, where he was able to get out of a 1st and 3rd situation, where at that point, that was during the Bayo running into the 7th inning. I didn't even necessarily love keeping him in there. I understand, the player progression part of it, but I had pretty little confidence in him there. He ends up walking the 9-man and gets behind in Rojas, the control just sort of failing him there. And yeah, it was 1st and 3rd with 1 out, and Lucas Sims is able to come in, immediately get Randy Arozarena to pop up, and ends up, getting Justin Turner to ground out to get out of that inning. So I think that their new bullpen additions are going to be massive for them. Ideally, the guys returning from injury are going to be able to play a role because you don't have a lot of high leverage relievers at this point in the year. And, maybe Liam Hendricks can play into that if he ever is going to make a return this season. We're not really sure about that. But I think that ultimately, for the Red Sox, this would be the time to be able to sort of take a step back and, gear yourself up to go. Now, it doesn't help that Kenley Jansen is currently listed as day-to-day. He had some lower back tweak during his appearance yesterday, was still able to close it out. But again, assuming that he's fully healthy, this is the time where the Red Sox really need to start to be ramping up because they built up all of this momentum ahead of the All-Star break and kind of lost it. Now, the front office was still willing to invest some prospect assets into making the team better now, even if it is just more so on the marginal side. But Red Sox are going to have a little bit of work cut out for them to, be able to put themselves in playoff contention. And I think that in the American League this year, it's anybody's ball game once you actually make it to the dance. But we will see. They kick off their series in Texas on Friday. But that is all the time we have for today. Thank you very much for tuning into the GSMC Sports Podcast. Thank you to the GSMC Sports Network for allowing us to host this show. Remember to like, follow, subscribe wherever you keep up with us. Be sure to check us out on social media as well for more exclusive short content. And we will be back same time as always tomorrow at 2:00 p.m. Eastern. We will see you then. Take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn it.